Hello everyone and welcome to our discussions on international relations. Today we'll be discussing United Nations Organization, an important international organization. Let's begin. So let's take a brief introduction of United Nations Organization. It succeeded the League of Nations, which was an international organization and which didn't prove fruitful to the international environment in eliminating or in stopping the world wars. So this arose on the ashes of League of Nations, and the name United Nations as such was revised by President Roosevelt, and it was first used in the declaration by the United Nations on 1st January 1942, when representatives of 26 nations pledged that their government to continue fighting together against the Axis power. And so, the United Nations organization officially came into existence on 24th of October 1945, when the charter had been ratified by five countries. Here you see are the China, Russia, that is the then USSR. So it's China, France, USA, USSR, and Britain. And every year, 24th October is celebrated as a United Nations Day. So here is a kind of summary you can say, or number of steps you see here, that how it had evolved. So first was the Atlantic Charter of 1941, and that was signed by President Roosevelt and Churchill. Then comes the United Nations Declaration of January 1942. Their members agreed to common principles and programs of Atlantic Charter of 1941. Then comes the Casablanca Conference of 1943, January 1943. Then the Food and Agriculture Conference of 1943. Again, a conference in 1943, that is Moscow Conference, 30th October. In November December 1943, you see Tehran Conference, and 7th is the Bretton Woods Conference of July 1944. So, in that conference, the members agreed to reach for an arrangement of two things. One is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and the second one is the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. Next is Dumbarton Oaks proposal, that's from August to October 1944. Next is Yalta Conference of 1945, and then the San Francisco Conference that happened between April to June 1945. And finally, in the last session of the conference held on June 25, 1945, where the charter was signed, that contains 10,000 words, and the charter has 111 articles, that is 111, which is further divided in 19 chapters and was finally prepared in 5 official languages, and those languages are French, Russian, English, Spanish, and Chinese. So here you see how it evolved. So as I said, that international organization like United Nations, this arose on the ashes of League of Nations. So League of Nations didn't prove successful in preventing the world war. So it could not bring that order and stability at international fora, and with the same objectives and aims, and you can even say more enhanced roles, this came into being United Nations. So maintenance of international peace and security became its chief objective, and in 1945, when it established following the devastation of the Second World War, with one central mission, and that mission was the maintenance of international peace and security. The UN does this by working to prevent conflict, helping parties in conflict to make peace by peacekeeping processes, and creating the conditions to allow only peace to hold and flourish. So, protection of human rights is the other thing. The term human rights was mentioned 7 times in the UN's founding charter, making the promotion and protection of human rights as their key purposes and their guiding principle. In 1948, Declaration of Human Rights brought human rights into the realm of international law. So, as provided in the Charter of United Nations, one of its purpose is to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and which was seen after the Second World War in the devastated continent of Europe. Next is from the start in 1945, that's the establishment of the United Nations. Main priorities of the United Nations was to achieve international cooperation in solving problems of economic, social, cultural, humanitarian character, and also in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms of all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion is concerned. So there shouldn't be any discrimination based on these grounds. The UN Charter in its preamble set an objective that reads to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and ever since the development of and respect for international law has been a key part of the organization. So here comes the principles of United Nations. United Nations is based on the principle of sovereign equality of all its members. That means all members are equal, and all members, in order to ensure to all of them the rights and benefits resulting from their membership, that means being part of United Nations, shall fulfill in good faith the obligations assumed by them in accordance with the present charter. That means they had certain obligations to be fulfilled being member of United Nations, and all international disputes should be solved by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security is not hampered and maintained and justice is not endangered. So they must settle their dispute in a peaceful way, and member countries they shall refrain in the international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity and political independence of any state. That means they'll not enroach upon any state. Uh, they'll not enroach against independence of any state, and they'll respect their territorial integrity. That means they will follow or they'll fulfill the charter provisions of the charter. All members they shall give the United Nations every assistance in any action it takes in accordance with the present charter. That means they'll be helping United Nations and they'll be cooperating within the spirit of the charter, and shall refrain from giving assistance to any state against which United Nations is taking preventive or enforcement action. That means when United Nations has launched any enforcement action against any state, member state will not help or cooperate that state. So these are the principles of United Nations. Now, membership of United Nations. This is also an important one. Under Article 3, you see it provides for original membership. So, original members of the United Nations states are those which have participated in United Nations Conference on International Organization at San Francisco, or having previously signed the declaration by United Nations of January 1, 1942, either of them sign the present charter and ratify it in accordance with Article 110 of the charter. Those are the original members. Now, Article 4 mentions about the membership of the United Nations, which is open for all peace-loving states and those states who accept obligations that are there in the charter and in the judgment of the organization. they are able and willing to carry out these obligations that are part of the present charter. So admission of any such states to membership in UN will be affected by a decision of the General Assembly. That means General Assembly is the one who has to decide upon the admission of a state upon the recommendation of the Security Council. So two important organs of United Nations works effectively here. Article 5 mentions that a member of United Nations against which preventive or enforcement action has been taken by Security Council may be suspended from the exercise of the rights and privileges of membership by the General Assembly upon the recommendations of Security Council, and the exercise of these rights and privileges may be resorted by the Security Council. Article 6 mentions that a member of the United Nations which has persistently violated the principles that are mentioned in the Charter, those states may be expelled from the organization by General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. These two organs, we kept repeating this General Assembly and Security Council. I'll be explaining them in a separate lecture under organs of United Nations. Let's take up multiple choice questions. So for today, first question is, who devised the name of United Nations? So it was coined by United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and it was first used in the declaration by United Nations of 1 January 1942 during Second World War. Next is, the Charter of the UN has how many articles? So the charter was signed at the last session of the conference, which was held on June 25, 1945. The charter was signed then only, containing 10,000 words in 111 articles, that's 111 articles, which is further divided in 19 chapters and finally prepared in 5 official languages, that are French, Russian, English, Spanish, and Chinese. So next question is, number of original members of United Nations. So Article 3 defines two types of memberships. One, original members, that means those states who joined the San Francisco Conference, and they were 51 in number. And the second category is one who joined UNO subsequently. So these are the two categories of member states. Fourth question is, UN Day is observed on which of the following dates? So United Nations Day marks the anniversary of the entry into force of United Nations in 1945, and with the ratification of this founding document by a majority of its signatories, including the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, it officially came into being, and 24th October has been celebrated as UN Day right since 1948. So 24 October here is the correct answer. Next question is, where is the headquarter of United Nations? So United Nations as an intergovernmental organization which is responsible for maintenance of international peace and security is headquartered in the New York City. It is one of the largest and most internationally represented and most powerful intergovernmental organization in the world that we have today. Thank you.